I would like now to introduce our keynote speaker for our program. He was born and raised in the city of Passaic, New Jersey. He is the son of Dominican immigrants Alejandro and Maritza Lora, and the brother to 5 siblings, Manuel, Henry, Alex, Angela, and Rita Lora. He attended and graduated from the Passaic Public School System and was later accepted to Seton Hall University. He attended Passaic County Community College, where he graduated with an associate's degree, summa cum laude, and went on to earn a bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, from Liberty University. Prior to entering political office, he worked at St. Mary's Hospital in Passaic, New Jersey for over 14 years, serving as director of multiple ancillary departments and as the public health and patient liaison within the public relations and marketing department. He was elected as a councilman in his hometown of Passaic, New Jersey in 2011, and he was elected twice as Passaic County freeholder, now referred to as county commissioners. In 2015, he became the first American Latino and the first American of Dominican heritage to serve as the director of the Passaic County Board of Education chosen freeholders. He is married to his lovely wife, Nicoris de los Santos Lora, a registered nurse, and together they are raising 5 boys, of which one of them serves his country proudly with the United States Marines. Today, he serves as the mayor of his hometown, Passaic, New Jersey. He was first elected into this position in 2017, winning against 4 opponents with 67% of the vote, and he was reelected in 2021 with 89% of the vote, defeating 2 opponents. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Mayor of Passaic, New Jersey, Mr. Hector Carlos Lora.
Thank you for that generous and most kind introduction. And my name is Hector Lora. I'm the mayor of the city of Passaic. I will share, as my son was mentioned, that he was promoted on September 1st to sergeant in the U.S. Marines. He came home from Okinawa and explained to me that sergeants and above are allowed to take their spouses when they get stationed, so can I put a wedding together in 3 days? So about 2 weeks ago, we put a wedding together in my backyard. So not only was he promoted, but he just recently got married, and it was a true blessing to participate, but he's always wanted to serve our nation, which leads me to where I would like to begin expressing my deepest appreciation for your service, your hard work, the sacrifices you make every single day, those moments that go unseen when there are no cameras and no press, when you keep us safe. Our families, our communities, our cities, our state, our nation is safer because of your work. It doesn't always get acknowledged. Sometimes it gets lost in the rhetoric, too often times by those who hold office or have platforms, and we forget to pause and remember that each and every one of you who stands up for this nation, who protects and ensures that those with malicious intent who would attempt to harm or to get something by your vigilant eyes, your committed spirit, the oath, most sacred oath that you took to uphold the laws of this nation is what makes the difference, that each of you have your families, each of you have your principles and your values. But when you put on that uniform, you have a duty that you must perform, and the honor of that most sacred oath, what you represent, does not come off like the uniform. Even when the uniform is off, you continue to uphold those values. So thank you, and I would like to applaud you for your service. Thank you. Specifically to Acting Port Director Jeffrey Green, thank you so very much for the invitation. To your Chief of Staff, David Quinones, who is also from Passaic, from the city of Passaic, and I was going to just give him a round of applause. I was going to ask you to hold the applause for the Mets part, but he's a Mets fan. I'm also a Giants fan, and that was a great game. That was my first job ever at Giants Stadium. And then to Director Russo. Thank you so very much for your words, your most inspiring introduction to this ceremony. You intimidated me when you threw out the vosotros. Those of you who took Spanish class, the first time we ran across that word as a Dominican American, I was familiar with nosotros, but vosotros, and then the explanation of conjugations, and I didn't have the easiest time. I always had to remind my friends, did you get all A's in English class? And they would go, no. I was like, all right, well, Spanish class is similar. You have to learn grammar and conjugation. They assumed because I spoke Spanish that I understood it. But I want to thank you so very much. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge some of my staff that is with me. Our business administrator, Rick Fernandez, of Cuban descent, also from Passaic, New Jersey. He's our business administrator. We call him the BA. I'm always reminding him the BA doesn't stand for best athlete because he was a star athlete. And every time I remind him, I hit a home run off of him in Babe Ruth, he goes, I don't remember that. I remember the times I struck you out. I don't remember. So I use that opportunity. Also, we have with us our administrative assistants, Sono Patel and Virginia Ortiz. Thank you for making it out. And Renee Nunez, who's the head of our media department and will be putting up your pictures on social media and City Hall. So thank you. I was asked to speak a little bit about myself, but I had noticed that today's tribute is from members of the Hispanic community who have made an impact on aviation and transportation over the years. I know that me and the business administrator often discuss our initiatives and approaches in the city of Passaic to make transportation more accessible to communities like ours, especially considering our demographic and the low rates of car ownership. We are just recently instituting a free shuttle that will transport individuals around the city at no cost, hoping to encourage more small business support as well as assist those who have to get to the bus terminal. And we have a brand new bus terminal, $6 million one going into the city of Passaic that connects train stations as we move forward with transit hub development. So I wanted to take that opportunity to acknowledge some prominent and influential Hispanic leaders in America in the fields of transportation. I wanted to acknowledge Ms. Nuria Fernandez, the first Afro-Latina to lead the Federal Transit Administration. She was previously the CEO and General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. Also, Federico Peña, the first Hispanic American to serve as the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, appointed in 1993, and he was also the mayor of Denver and a civil rights lawyer. Mr. Victor Mendez, the Federal Highway Administrator from 2009 to 2014. He played a key role in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. And Ms. Flora Castillo, the first Latina to chair the American Public Transportation Association, APTA. These are prominent Latinos and African Latinos that rose to positions of influence and had Hispanic background, and I wanted to acknowledge them, staying in line with the theme of today's celebration and obviously recognizing Hispanic heritage. I think it was shared, and Director Russo made a most poignant, or pointed to something that impacted me, the challenge of language. Yo hablo español. Yo lo hablo mucho mejor ahora que cuando yo era niño. Cuando era niño no lo hablaba mucho. Es más, yo le respondía a mis padres en inglés cuando ellos me hablaban a mí en español. Y hablaba mi español con un poco de dominicanidad. So un poco Spanglish, un poco de slang. What I said is I speak Spanish much better now than I did as a child. As a child, I responded to my parents in English because it wasn't always a point of pride or of great recognition. Diversity wasn't always celebrated as it is in today's day. I'm a proud American born in the city of Passaic. I love this nation and what it represents and the opportunities that this nation offers, but I can easily recollect moments with my parents and considering their inability to articulate or express themselves in English, and admit to you, and with some guilt, but for point of transparency or for the sake of transparency, embarrassment. I would be ashamed of the way my parents would try to communicate and couldn't get through the language. I want to present 3 points, and I am aware of the time and the traffic and the fact that there is food waiting. And when I asked how long can I speak, they said take as long as you want. And I said, listen, I'm a politician and I'm off time. I minister and preach in Jersey City. The two people you don't want to give a mic to is a preacher and a politician. The only times people tell me speak as long as you want at a program is if they have to return directly to work or class after my speech, and they're like, no, keep going, keep going. But when there's food, I start seeing when people start checking their watches, they start looking at the food more than me. So I don't want to go too very long, but I wanted to give a few examples. And these 3 points is I wanted to make, or rather are these 3 points. One, that the Latino and Hispanic community is unique in many ways from other communities. And point 2, that the Hispanic or Latino community is so very much the same in so many ways as other communities. And then the last point that perhaps I will conclude on, I'll try my best to get there in the quickest way, or try to be succinct, is that the journey of Latinos and their accents should be considered and viewed as badges of honor, much like I spoke of your badges of honor, and I'll propose to you why. I want to go back to the example with my mother. I remember going to school with my mother and having her trying to communicate with faculty or principals' needs or concerns and not being able to. At that time, we didn't have a lot of teachers that spoke Spanish, so she would try her best. It was to my advantage in certain circumstances, especially parent-teacher night, when I would be asked to translate, and the teacher would look at my mother and say, tell your mother you are being disruptive in class, you are not doing your work, you talk too much, and you need to focus. You have potential and you're not applying it. I'm going to promise. I turn my mother and say, ella le gusta como yo me comunico en la clase. Soy muy expresivo. Ella está optimística por mi potencial y quiere que yo siga adelante y ella te aplauda tu trabajo en tener un buen niño. And I would turn and smile. At a certain point, the teachers would figure it out that I am not translating what they're saying. But my mother would respond, gracias, gracias. And eventually translators were offered, but I would use it to my advantage when I could, especially if I had to bring a correspondence or communication from school to express it to my mother. But whenever there was exchanges with the neighbors, law enforcement, perhaps in the neighborhood, having to speak to my father, and they would struggle to share the words, I would be embarrassed. I know my older brother, Alex, would request my mother to drop him off blocks before school because she would drop him off in that very Latina mother way with either rollers in the hair or abata and chacletas and want to come out and kiss him in front of everyone. And my brother like, no, I'm good. Drop me off blocks ahead. And I didn't understand their story, so I couldn't truly embrace it. And here's where I would share that first point of why Latinos are so unique, Hispanics. First, I propose to you that the Hispanic community, and perhaps this is obvious, but sometimes take it for granted, are not a monolithic or homogeneous group. We are different amongst ourselves. You will find dialect differences between Colombians and Cubans and Puerto Rican and Peruvian and Ecuadorian and Dominican and Bolivian and so many others, El Salvadorian or Uruguayan. We have different approaches to life. We come with our own cultures. And is that the signal? Is that like the overture music at the Academy Awards where they play the music off? They're like, listen, this story starts back when you were in grammar school. You're a mayor now. We can't handle all of that journey. So wrap it up and give us the example. I'm going to try because I put some things together. But as I was sharing, each story is unique. Some come to this country on land, some on air, some on ships. But I would propose to you that all come with a common desire, not uniform in our approach to life, not even our beliefs, our religion, or even necessarily our races. As I spoke about African Latinos, we have African Latinos, we have European Latinos, we have indigenous Latinos. I often have to share with people that it's not the Native American, but the natives of the Americas. That we often forget the Mayans and the Incans and so many indigenous people that connected all of these lands. And I share this because it's important. Being Dominican, we have the highest in terms of demographically speaking population of African Latinos. In fact, so much we're defined as African Latinos if you look up our information. But when we hear, oftentimes that is forgotten. There are the races of black and white and Indian in our countries. So we have so many differences, and oftentimes it's difficult to acknowledge or highlight that here because we're just lumped in together. In fact, we're identified by a language. You're Spanish. And oftentimes trying to explain to people, I'm not Spanish, I'm not from Spain, opens up a whole different conversation. We are no more Spanish than I would turn to someone who speaks English and say, you must be English. He would go, I'm not from England, I'm American, I speak English. I'm often having to remind people I speak Spanish, but I am Hispanic, I'm Latino, I am African Latino, I am so many things. My family comes from indigenous background, but people go, make it simple, like we would hope your speech would be. Just, if you're Spanish, it's easier to identify. So I don't think people do it out of malice. It just takes so much. Sometimes we have to pause and study and learn so much about other people's cultures to appreciate. That's why I don't take it in a bad way. I give people the benefit of the doubt and I share the information with them. But again, we are unique in our approaches. Oftentimes, because we speak Spanish, people assume we're all connected. I think some here who have a Hispanic background, a Latino background, may have experienced the question, so do you know this person? Do you know Jorge? Do you know Hector? In my case, I do, because Hector is Mr. Quinones' brother, who we graduated together and went to school, a remarkable leader, and they come from an amazing family. But I point to that fact that we often find ourselves challenged. And with my mother, I remember being embarrassed about those challenges when she would try to communicate at the supermarket for a specific product. That's before they had that Goya aisle and all the ethnicity aisles, and she couldn't find the food that she wanted. And sometimes they would make fun of her, or people would get frustrated at her or be disrespectful to her because of the fact that she couldn't speak the language. I think some have experienced that. I was embarrassed and ashamed. I would look at other people's parents who could articulate, who understood American culture, who were quick to sign up their children to every activity because they were privy, involved, and aware. And my mother would miss some of the stuff because if it would come home in the book bag, she couldn't read it anyway. She just knew she wanted us to do our homework, and she wanted us to stay out of trouble. I remember being impacted early in the morning to see my father, who couldn't put two words together in English. I remember a funny moment when he was trying to get my mother to come inside, and he kept saying, "Cama here, cama here." And it became the joke in my neighborhood because cama means bed, and those who laugh was like, why was he calling your mother to bed? And we were like, no, he was saying, come inside. And they would make these very insensitive jokes, and we would try to laugh it off. And my father was a traditional Latino. He would open up the door in his Hanes tighty whities, and we'd be like, Dad, this is not the Caribbean, cut it out. And we had those stairs that went straight up in an incline, so he would be adamant about going up first while people are following him. It was embarrassing. I paint this picture because for him it was nothing. He came from the Caribbean islands, so he was in shorts and underwears all the time. That was not as always acceptable around our group of friends. And I remember looking at him in the morning around 5 o'clock in the morning one day going to school. It was snowing. Standing in front, we grew up in Passaic, Myrtle Ave, right between Summer and Burgess, if you're familiar with the area, and he would smoke his cigarette early in the morning. It was a particular frigid morning. It had snowed, and he was shoveling the snow, getting his old car that barely turned on, getting ready to go to work 5:30 in the morning. I remember looking at him from the window as a kid, and it impacted me that my father was up at 5. I was up waiting for that bell that goes off that says no school, because whenever it snowed, you're so tired until they told you no school. Now you got all the energy in the world. And I was looking out the window as he was going off to a factory, because that was most of the jobs that immigrants would take. Even if they had an education, they took humble positions because of the lack of ability to communicate in English to provide for their families. And as I'm looking out the window and watching him get ready to work, it struck me that he was doing that for me, for my siblings, so that we could eat. That he was taking whatever challenge or whatever adversity or whatever insult that was coming his way and keeping his mouth quiet because he had to put food on the table. He never complained about it. I know it was rough for him because I saw it from my mother, and I imagine it was even harder for him. But he never brought that home. He would get up. Before the sun would rise, he would be out there in a car that could barely turn on to go work at whatever humble position or whatever they sent him to do so that we could eat. That marked me and changed me, gave me a deep appreciation for the sacrifices that he had to make so that I could bother him to have cool sneakers, so that I can get into an argument at that time and explain to him why Etonics at $50, some of you may not remember, they were cool for a little season with the hammer pants, why I needed them so badly so that I can impress my friends, not understanding how hard he had to work to make $50 when he was working for $3 an hour at the time, barely making minimum wage so that we can eat. But for him, he was grateful for those $3 an hour because this nation represented something so remarkable and so amazing, opportunity to progress and to provide his children with a better future that he had access to. My mother, over time, I learned to appreciate her accent. I take a little bit of issue with those who refer to individuals who can't speak English so perfectly, so proficiently as speaking broken English. I'll tell you why I took issue with it is because when something is broken, you point to something that's whole and you messed up. It falls into pieces. Now one may argue, well, English is whole and they're breaking it, but I would propose to you that it's pieced together English. Much like an artist or an engineer, because they're putting something together that they didn't have before. They're creating something. And the connotation when you say you're broken English is a negative one. You're speaking broken English as if they ever had access to whole English at one time. No, they came not understanding a single word of English and pieced it together, and not always with the privilege or opportunity of going to school, but rather going to work and having to pick up in context when they're being yelled at. Okay, I got this word. Or watching TV or picking it up. And I began to admire the fact that she could try something new, that she could face the adversities and challenges of life, leaving everything that she knew behind to take upon herself a journey somewhere that she did not know and say, I will make it there. To come here with my father and work so hard, I began to see their accents as badges of honor, as testimonies of individuals that were courageous and valiant enough to try something new. I began to look at people who have accents and say, that's amazing, because there are those that would accuse or make fun of you and they barely master their own. And here you are trying to take on 2 or 3 or more. For what? Not so that people would applaud you or highlight you, so that you could work, so that you can provide for your children. It changed my perspective, and never again was I ashamed of her accent or anybody's accent, whether they came from the continent of Africa, Europe, whether they came from China or anywhere in Asia. That accent to me was something impressive to go, you learned something new. Because if you drop me in another country, you drop me in India and come back for me in 6 months, I'll barely know a couple of words. So the idea that they were forced, compelled, without other options to do so is amazing. And I began to applaud her. I began to share with people with great pride how my mother is learning English, how she watches TV, how she sits there and watches Good Times with Us and says dynamite in her broken accent. And we're like, Mom, that doesn't mean what you think it means. When she's like, limpia tu cuarto, clean your room, dynamite. And I'm like, no, that's not how it's used. Mom, that's not how it's used. Or she's watching Who's the Boss or Family Ties or any one of these shows that we grew up on while we were watching TV, and she would try to pick up some of the words. And like most of us who have immigrant parents, they understood more than they spoke. They got it, and it wasn't a reflection of their intelligence. It was just lack of knowledge. They didn't know the words, but they were capable. They were remarkably resourceful in their own countries, and even more so here. And that became so impressive to me. As we celebrate Hispanic culture, I consider the words of Cesar Chavez, who said, the preservation of one's own culture and race does not require a lack of appreciation of another. You can fully appreciate everyone else's culture and race and be very proud of yours, and never shy away from who you are or your culture, and stand up proud. And I'm a proud Hispanic. Yo soy orgullosamente dominicano y latino, but at the same time I deeply appreciate other cultures and races. But it's important that we would learn about ourselves, as Director Russo said, as it was mentioned earlier, that we would take these opportunities to study and to highlight diversity, because as the great and famous Dominican Oscar de la Renta said here, the greatest power is to know yourself. How can you ever be free? How can you ever be empowered? How can you ever be confident if you don't know yourself? I consider the many stories of so many Latinos and so many immigrants over the hundreds of years as this nation has formed, whether Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Polish immigrants, and so many others, those who came from all over the world to begin lives and to shape and form this great nation. We have so much in common, which is the second point. We want our families to succeed. We want to be safe. We appreciate this nation. A misconception among many immigrants is that somehow they come here with this negative view of America. If they thought America was so bad, they wouldn't be coming here. They view America as a beacon of hope and opportunity. My father was a proud American. When he became a citizen, we couldn't get him to take the flag off. Every shirt he wanted to buy had to have the flag. And I loved every bit about it. He spoke about this nation as the greatest nation in the world, a nation that offered him opportunity. Not a perfect nation. There's not a single one around the world. But he loved this nation, and he instilled it in us, so much so that we pass it on to the next generation. My son at 8 years old said, I'm going to serve this nation. I'm going to be a Marine. He was the honors graduate out of 400. I was so very proud of him when I got to see it in COVID because his name got mentioned. The pandemic didn't allow individuals to individually be mentioned, but I got to see him on screen. We couldn't go to Paris Island. When he went to Okinawa to serve and he was far away, I was comfortable because I held him in my heart. And I love the fact that my family loves this nation, that immigrants love this nation, that being Hispanic, there is no conflict between being a proud Puerto Rican, a proud Dominican, a proud Uruguayan or Peruvian or Colombian or wherever you're from, and still being proud to be an American, no less than anyone else who's Irish American or Polish American or African American or others. We love this nation. We sometimes have challenges with it, and that's important that we are able to express that because it highlights why this nation is great, because we're free to do so. Because in this nation, we can speak up. We can oppose a particular political figure. We can express our support for one, even though everyone says, I don't agree. Well, that's your right. I don't care if you agree. That's what I believe in. And in this nation, I'm free to say that. That's what makes this nation so wonderful. That is why when the flag comes and we salute, I do it with great enthusiasm. When we sing the national anthem, I do it with joy. And that's why every single time I have an opportunity, I stand up for our police, our fire, our military, and all our men and women in uniform. Because I will put up this nation against any other nation around the world, and even those who are most ardently against it or adamantly opposed to it, offer them a trade and watch them say, no, I wouldn't go anywhere else. I'm free here to object. Again, that is not to say we don't have issues. We do. But we're free to express them. And there's great hope from the time this nation was originally formed to present time that we can continue to work because it was intended to be a more perfect union. It didn't begin perfect, and it developed into these great United States, and all of us play a part collaboratively to ensure its success and that we leave it better off for the next generation to come. I highlight these things, but I go back to why I'm so proudly Hispanic. Like the great Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, my Latina heritage burns in me like an ember, and it will never be extinguished. I feel that every day, which leads me to that third point that I would like to conclude and get you to eat and hopefully finish up with these words. I started looking at the stories of my parents and immigrants as a whole and said it is a badge of honor to tell people. I left for many different reasons than others. Perhaps some left because of political turmoil, persecution, uncertainty. Others left because of ambition. I can do more over there. I can send back money to my family and bring them. Others left because of extenuating circumstances. I got a sick family member. I need to make sure that I get them the treatment that they need. Whatever compelled them, whatever motivated them, whatever inspired them, whatever was that spark, that flame inside of them that grew and burnt to the point that they could not be still and said, no matter what adversity I face, no matter what lies ahead, I will go to this great nation, this amazing and remarkable nation, and I will make a life for myself and I will succeed. My father passed away in 2017 of cancer. I remember before he passed away expressing to him my appreciation for all that he did. His retort, son, I got to this country without speaking a single word of English. I landed in the city of Passaic, worked in a factory. I got to see my son take up the highest position of this city and become the mayor. None of my efforts were in vain. I realized, and it gave me perspective, that our work is not often for us. It's for the next generation. My dad was part of that group that watched TV and fell in love with rock and roll and fell in love with American culture and said, I want to go there. I loved pointing out his old pictures and his bell bottoms and his afro and say, Dad, this was you in the Dominican Republic. He said, we had a little style. We had a little bit of style back there. So many are inspired to come here. Perhaps when you face someone who is overly expressive of their culture, they put a flag on almost everything. T-shirts, sneakers, car, and everything. It is in no way, as Cesar Chavez said, a lack of appreciation for this nation or others, but rather a deep-rooted commitment to never forget where we come from. Never forget the roots, to understand that if we have opportunity today, it's because those who came before us opened doors and went through so much. I'll conclude there because I had so much more to share. I would have shared it if it was started at 11, but I want to make sure, and that was my fault. We were behind those trailers for hours. I will say this, it's a little sensitive. I have to share this. When my staff told me about the invitation, this is the way it was conveyed to me. They said, Border Patrol wants you to give a speech on Hispanics. I said, can you elaborate? give me a little context. That's the way it was shared to me. You got an invitation. I said, what border? Am I going to Texas? Am I going to Arizona? And what side of the border will I give the speech on? Because that might impact how it's going to be received. Can you get me more information? Because there's some sensitive issues. And they said, well, we'll get more information. And then to Virginia's credit, she came back, and said, no sensitive issue. No sensitive issue. She specifically sent me this flyer. She said, no sensitive. It's U.S. Custom and Border Protection, Port of New York and Newark in Elizabeth. No sensitive issues. I said, great. Then I turned on the news. I said, okay, no problem. So all that is to say, I'm glad that things are going well right now. Obviously, I stand with all of the hardworking men and women who get up every day to make sure that this nation operates effectively and that we can live our day-to-day lives, and I'll end where I began. Thank you for your service. Thank you for this invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to share just a little bit about myself. I would have went into my story. I thought my parents' story was much more appropriate because I wouldn't be me without them, just like none of you would be you without them. And if I could propose today, if you still have them around, because I don't have my father, give them a call and just say thank you for all the sacrifices you made, whether here or somewhere else, so that I can be who I am. Thank you so very much.